Well, I'm at the point where I'm going to read you this week's installment of the ongoing story of Ezekiel Kralin and the two dogs and his friend Deke and the various other people who hang around in the street below his apartment window and wake him up with their calling to the sky or whatever else they're doing out there. Am I Listening is the title of this. Ezekiel Kralin wrote, email correspondence, January 27th. Subject, and more good news. Barely moments after sending you that last missive, I heard a familiar scratchy voice outside, so leapt from my chair and looked out the window. It was Scampy. She seemed to be in good cheer as she crossed the street toward my building and then turned left up Market and toward Castro Street. I know Deke was concerned for her well-being since she disappeared just a few days after occupying a room she and her boyfriend had acquired from a homeless service. He'll be glad to hear the good news, and I'll make sure he gets it in case he didn't hear about it before he next shows up, which should be next week, February 3rd at the latest. I just can't keep up with this stuff. Subject, he dropped by last night around 10 p.m. Date, January 28th. With that baby carriage containing whatever, and the pups, of course, invited me to sit with them by the curb while he sat by himself, cross-legged against the ATM plywood. We didn't talk, just watched people walk by, and he seemed to be caught up in his own thoughts. Fine with me, as I could enjoy the hound's company in peace. It was a cold evening. The dogs were without sweaters, and the sidewalk was uncomfortably chill. My own butt didn't like it. There wasn't even cardboard for the doggies to sit upon, and I couldn't manage both in my lap at the same time, so one or the other had to sit or stand beside me with my arm wrapped about. I therefore switched their places every 5 minutes or so, and the third or fourth time I had lucky rest upon my thighs. Flacco left my side and started tugging on her leash, tethered to the buggy, in her desire to cuddle with her master for warmth. But she also loves him too, so there's that. Sometimes if she's tethered a short distance from him, she'll eventually decide this isn't right and bark incessantly until he brings her close to him. So it's not always just because she wants shelter from the cold. She wants his heart. She senses his sad or angry moods and longs to ease his pangs and shows great pride in playing that role as guardian. My little bodhisattva Brindlekin. I remember one day, about a year ago, the pups were lying down on my cot while I was working on my laptop. Whatever it was, maybe a browser glitch, I grew frustrated, banged my fist upon the desk. Flacco immediately sat up, approached me, and lay a dainty paw on my hip. I instantly grabbed her up in my arms with hugs and kisses and realized then to never display anger, no matter how slight, in either doggie's presence again. They are just too damned sweet for that. Flacco is a strong-willed little doggie, and before either Deke or I could stand up to bring her back to my side, she resisted my tugs on her leash. She managed to free herself from the collar and leap into her master's lap. Her remarkable persistence was a sight to see, how she struggled against the collar with all her might. Her head became a fat ball of fur until she finally escaped. Instead of griping at me for letting her do this, as I expected, he kindly accepted her into his arms and asked me to toss him the collar. So there was Flacco, contentedly curled up in her master's lap, and Lucky resting on his back in my arms, in a shower of neck and belly scritches from my free hand. Almost a half hour had passed before I grew uncomfortable sitting on the frigid concrete, and I also wanted to provide the pooches with a cozy warm nest, seeing as Deke was still here, even though he said he's only dropping by for a few minutes. But I hesitated to do that, since he often puts up a stink whenever I lay out cardboard and a comforter for the pups. I finally decided to risk it, and said to him as an excuse to run upstairs and bring that stuff down, "Would you like a cup of tea?" To my dismay, he said no thanks. "Well then," I said after some deliberation, "I'm going to bring out some cardboard for me to sit on. My butt's too cold." When I stood up and made for the gate, I added, "I have another pair of those gray doggy sweaters you like. They just arrived this morning. Can I put them on the dogs?" To my surprise, he said, "Okay," nor did he explode into a tantrum when I stepped back out and laid down a large sheet of cardboard and my orange sleeping bag for the quadrupeds. Even Flacco returned to my side for that. So I put their sweaters on with gentle hands and kind words, and they curled up together as I pet them and enjoyed my visit even more, especially since their master conveyed a most restful spirit this time around, but it didn't last. I had maybe a full hour of peace before Deke started mumbling to himself, "Sucks. This sucks. Suck, suck, suck." This went on for a few minutes, but of course I pretended not to hear, wondering if this was going to lead to something worse, and it did. "I've been feeling sick since I got that room," he declared. "Are you listening? The room's making me sick. My bones ache. I don't feel like eating. I don't even want to smoke my crystal." I was tempted to say, "Well, that's a good thing, isn't it?" Meaning the meth, of course, but I held my tongue. Then he leaned forward a bit and scowled. "Are you listening?" Damn it, I thought, he's sucking me into another round of bullshit. "Yes, Deke, I'm listening," I begrudgingly answered. "I just don't know what to say. Maybe your body's recovering from all those stormy, wet days, one after another for weeks, and you need to rest up. You're no youngster anymore. You're 43. "I knew you'd say that," he exclaimed, jabbing a finger in my direction. "Nobody listens to me. Nobody believes me. They don't want to hear it, and you say you're my friend. Ha!" He then went off on a lengthy diatribe about the shelter where he's staying, wherever that is, as he refuses to tell me. "You'll never know," he exclaimed. "Well, is it a room or a cabin?" I queried. "You'll never know," he repeated. His side of the story. Everyone there smokes fentanyl, and the fumes are choking him. The couple next door are noisy all night. The air conditioning is spreading COVID. The meals are shitty. He's going to die there. The dogs are going to die there. 5 people have already died there since he's shown up. No police are allowed inside. They just let residents drop dead like flies. No doctor, no nurse. They do COVID checks every day. They jot down in a notebook whenever he takes a shit. Why would he lie about this? He has never lied to me even once in all the time we've known each other. Blah, blah, blah. "So you're surrounded by drug addicts, just like on the streets," I quipped. "You're an addict yourself, Deke. This should not be an issue for you. These people who run the shelter deal with very disturbed folks coming in off the streets. You are an exception, but they need to handle everyone the same. It's a first step in the right direction to more stable housing. Count your blessings. They finally took you in. I bet the dogs love their new little home, sheltered from the cold, wet nights. Besides, what's this about COVID spreading? According to you, it's fake, so why all the worry now?" Please note, Watson, I didn't say all that in one fell swoop. I sprinkled a statement here and there in his stream of rants as it floated by, one lotus petal at a time. At one point he lowered his head with trembling shoulders, about to burst into faux tears. "No, he's going to cry now," I emoted. "Here comes the sobbing, the drama, the unadulterated bullshit." Well, that put a damper on his game real fast, let me tell you. For I showed him what a doomed tactic that would be by my caustic outburst. But what really impressed me was when he said, "They're forcing me to stay there. They say I shouldn't talk about leaving. I shouldn't even think about leaving. They're counting on me to go through the whole process, and I can't let them down, so I'm stuck." Music to my ears, good doctor. He's staying, even though he proclaimed he may not return, but resume roughing it on the streets. More to scare me than anything else, I presume. Toward the end of our one-sided argument, he asked if I could loan him a few dollars. I said sure, and I ran back upstairs to pull a $5 from my wallet. But before I opened the gate to retrieve his 5 spot, I turned to him and said, "It's very brave of you to check out that shelter and place your trust in them. You are doing great." Once I returned, a homeless woman I've seen a few times before was helping Deke pack up. She's the stable type, friendly and always nicely dressed in a street punk kind of way, around 32 years old. Upon her arrival, Deke snapped back into a pleasant mood, thanked me for the moolah, and wished me a good night. The lady smiled at me, and I smiled back, and then they were gone. So I placed the cardboard I had set down for the pups by the trash bin, picked them up and emptied the water bowl, retrieved my sleeping bag, and returned hovel. Oh, yeah, as soon as Deke showed up last night, I did remember to tell him I saw Scampy the other night. "Oh, what did she say?" he pressed. "Well, I only saw her through my window crossing the street," I replied, "but she seemed to be in good spirits." Here's the neatest thing I got out of last night's meetup. Again, the shaman's oblique kind of gift-giving. This time the gift was to drop by for a while, that I may enjoy the pup's gracious company. He's never done that before. welcome me to join him and the pups outside, that is. Prior to this, it's always been to ask me to sit the mutts while he goes somewhere. For until last night, he's always wanted to be left alone with the doggies, so he'd be available for whatever vagrant comes along to join him for friendly conversating, or purchase a bit of his product, whether weed or meth, though I wish it include shrooms. I, of course, would be in the way. But being the trickster he is, he had to cover up his latest gift with a wrapping of crazy rants bound together by a cord of dubious friendship all tied up in a bow. He dropped by last night around 10 p.m., date January 29th morning. Watson wrote, if he's still wheeling all his stuff around with him, it makes me wonder if the place he's staying is a unit that's all his, or if it's one of those situations where they must clear out every morning with all their stuff and then come back at such and such an hour. I replied, no, I don't think that's the case. I believe he has his own room or cabin 24/7, but they don't allow you to bring in stuff off the streets, as it would surely cause bedbug invasions. Perhaps they're allowed a little storage in a separate bin. But you definitely cannot drag stuff off the streets and into the shelter. Maybe he stashes the buggy on a side street or some hidden spot. I think he uses it just for the doggies when they need a break from so much walking around. All it contains is a thick, furry throw rug and a couple of warm jackets. When he took off in a taxi, all he brought with him were the dogs and his Bluetooth speaker and smartphone. He wasn't even wearing a jacket, just a T-shirt. Watson wrote, or maybe it's just his long-standing habit to have his stuff with him. I replied, I think so. Old habits die hard. In this transition into housing, it's like a security blanket. Watson wrote, his litany of complaints is exactly what I'd expect. Also, it must be damn difficult to adjust to secure shelter after so many years of living on the street. Happy ending, though, for now. I replied, I believe that's an accurate assessment. I was just about to post to you my latest Deke report when I saw this email. It will show up in less than a minute from now. Subject, I came that close to calling the cops again. Date January 29th, afternoon. Another morning that started out peacefully. I arose at 8:30 a.m. and resumed listening to Marshall's latest podcast while straightening out the bedding, turning my Chromebook back on and checking my Moto E for the latest news. But that didn't last too long at all before I heard Deke hollering up to my window. This is all capital letters here. Come down here, Zeke. I need your help. I'm sick. The dogs are sick. I need to go to the hospital. And we'll hear the rest of that, or the beginning of the rest of that, next week.